questioning the Biden administration, what the White House press secretary told us inside the briefing room. Pro-life proposal, how one senator on Capitol Hill wants to prevent funding for abortion. Senate confirmation, new developments in the president's pick to take over the Department of Education. And religious persecution. Father Joseph Cassar tells us about life for religious minorities in Iraq. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Religious freedom and medicine. We asked the White House if Catholic physicians will be forced to violate their conscience and perform procedures that go against their morals. And President Joe Biden shares a story about his rosary. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. Today I asked White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki specifically about conscience protections. There are many Americans who are worried tonight those protections are about to disappear under the Biden administration.
There's pro-life groups right now very concerned about the phrase pregnancy discrimination in the Equality Act. You're familiar with that, I'm sure. That it would force doctors to perform abortions even if it violates their conscience. There are also concerns the bill would force doctors to perform gender transition surgeries and sterilizations again, even if it violates their conscience. What does President Biden, say about those concerns?
The president's been a long supporter of Roe v. Wade. It has been his consistent belief that should be law, and he will fight to continue to protect that as being law.
Conscience concerns is not a concern of his?
No, I think, again, I'm just going to state what the president's policies are. Did you have another question?
Will President Biden keep the Conscience and Religious Freedom Division at HHS, the office that was put in place under President Trump, will he keep it in place to receive conscience complaints from those doctors?
You'll have to talk to a future Secretary Becerra once he is confirmed.
The press secretary was referring to President Joe Biden's nominee for health secretary. Javier Becerra has been accused of working against pro-life and religious freedom groups. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden, in his virtual meeting with Mexico's President Monday, talked about his faith. The president has come under intense criticism for his stance on some of the preeminent issues in the church.
During my visits, I got to know Mexico a little bit and its people and paid my respects to the Virgin of Guadalupe. As a matter of fact, I still have my rosary beads that my son was wearing when he passed.
Also tonight, education. I asked the White House press secretary if President Biden has a firm date for when all kids should be in school full-time learning. She did not give me a specific answer on that other than to say the president wants kids in school 5 days a week and that the American Rescue Plan will help make that happen. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, the Senate has confirmed President Joe Biden's nominee, Miguel Cardona, for Education Secretary. Cardona previously served as Connecticut's Education Commissioner. He has supported biological males who identify as transgender females to participate in girls' athletics. In 2019, several female athletes sued the state of Connecticut over its policy, which allowed student athletes to compete based on their preferred gender identity. Joining us now is Christiana Holcomb, legal counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom. She also worked on the case involving the female athletes in Connecticut. Christiana, welcome back. Great to have you on again. I want to talk about the new Education Secretary, Miguel Cardona, in just a minute. But first, what's the latest in your case involving the female athletes in Connecticut?
Yes, well, on Friday, Alliance Defending Freedom attorneys made our case to the court. We argued that Title IX was designed specifically to protect opportunities, athletic opportunities for female athletes like our clients, and we want to ensure that they continue to have those opportunities moving forward. So we now sit back and wait, and we expect to hear back from the court within the next few weeks.
I want to go back now to Miguel Cardona. He was Education Secretary in Connecticut, where that lawsuit was filed. What can we expect from him in this new position?
Well, I think it's deeply concerning that Dr. Cardona, during his confirmation hearings, was not willing to affirm fairness for female athletes. He dodged the question, and as now the head of the federal agency charged with enforcing Title IX, it's deeply concerning that he was not willing to formally take a position and affirm that young female athletes have the right to fair competition.
Former President Donald Trump has been discussing women's sports as well. In his speech at CPAC over the weekend, he said women's sports could die if transgender males are allowed to participate. Do you agree with him?
Well, certainly, if biological males are, as a matter of policy, allowed to compete in and dominate the female category, we really do face a future in which we will have men's sports and co-ed sports. Women's sports will not be able to exist as a separate category, and for one very simple reason. There are inherent physical differences between the sexes. That is the entire reason we have women's sports as a separate category, because biological males have athletic advantages that comparably fit and trained female athletes simply cannot compete against.
And Christiana, before I let you go, any final thoughts as where we are headed when it comes to female athletics?
Well, I think it's deeply concerning that this administration already has a track record of anti-woman and anti-science policies. Just this past week, the House of Representatives passed the so-called Equality Act, which would undermine women's private spaces, their homeless shelters, and yes, even women's sports on a national level. So it's a deeply concerning trend, and it is time for the American people to stand up and speak out if they want to see a future where young female athletes can continue to compete in the sports that they love.
And we're going to leave it right there. Christiana Holcomb, legal counsel with the Alliance Defending Freedom. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, the Senate is on the clock to pass President Joe Biden's COVID relief bill by the end of the week. However, several Republicans and progressives are unhappy with portions of the legislation, including pro-life Senator Mike Braun. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more on what he plans. Eric.
That's right, Tracy. The Catholic senator says that he's upset with the amount of increased funding for abortions in the latest COVID relief bill that's currently being negotiated right now in the Senate. So he's introduced an amendment to the bill, one that would prevent a certain type of health coverage to cover abortions.
Whenever they have legislation like this, you can be assured they're going to push their agenda items.
Catholic Senator Mike Braun tells me that Democrats' pro-abortion policy is alive and well in this latest COVID relief bill. One way he's pushing back is introducing an amendment to the $1.9 trillion bill, preventing COBRA insurance from reimbursing doctors and clinics when they perform an abortion. COBRA insurance is the transitional coverage offered when someone leaves a job.
That shows you to what degree and detail the other side is pushing their agenda. In this instance, sadly, it's going to be for discussion because I'm doubting, it'll get one vote on the other side of the aisle.
But he's not giving up. He says due to a Democratic-controlled House, Senate, and White House, change will likely have to come at the state level, then fight and win in the courts. As for passing the next COVID relief bill,
the Senate will take up the American Rescue Plan this week. I expect a hearty debate and some late nights, but the American people sent us here with a job to do.
Senate Democrats are pressing forward without the minimum wage increase and without Republican support. Republicans tell me only 9% of the bill actually funds COVID relief, and the rest is filled with money going to the liberal wish list and promises to donors.
I was hoping the new administration, particularly given the president discussing so frequently being a moderate, would choose to take a different path. They're going to try to muscle this through on a totally partisan basis.
Both senators in both the Republican and Democratic Party held luncheons today to talk about the COVID relief bill and ways to go about it. Now, Democrats are definitely feeling the pressure as the deadline for many of the health coverages are set to expire at the middle of this month. From the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
The Archdiocese of New Orleans urges Catholics to avoid the new Johnson & Johnson coronavirus vaccine if other options are available. The Archdiocese calls it morally compromised. That's because it was made from abortion-derived cells. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops agrees morally compromised vaccines should be avoided if there are alternatives. The Biden administration encourages Americans to take the first available vaccine. Hundreds of girls kidnapped in Nigeria have been released and are now safe. Gunmen raided their school early Friday, taking nearly 300 girls ages 10 and up. It's not clear if a ransom was paid for their release. The students will receive medical checkups before being returned to their parents. On Sunday, Pope Francis prayed for their safe return. The Vatican Secretary of State emphasizes the importance of the Pope's trip to Iraq despite security concerns.
The Holy Father is going to Iraq just to show closeness to the Catholic Church, to the Christians. We know that the Church has suffered a lot during this year.
Cardinal Pietro Parolin says the trip will boost efforts to rebuild the country and to end corruption. The Iraqi government is set to offer financial compensation to survivors of the 2014 genocide committed by ISIS against the Yazidi community. According to local media, the Yazidi survivor law also calls for a state-run department to care for those left behind by ISIS. Advocates call the measure an important first step. In August 2014, ISIS began a violent assault on the Yazidi religious minority. Hundreds of thousands of members were displaced. Nearly 3,000 remain missing. Joining us now from Duhok, Iraq, is Father Joseph Cassar, director of the Jesuit Refugee Service in Iraq, and he's been working there since 2016. Father Cassar, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on. Can you tell us a little bit about the Yazidi community and why they were targeted by ISIS?
The Yazidis are a very ancient ethnic religious community. For the most part, they were concentrated around the Sinjar mountain. That's in the northern governorate or province of Nineveh. There's also another concentration around the city of Sheikhan, which is very close to Duhok. Why were they targeted? Well, they are regarded as devil worshippers, which they aren't, so that's a misnomer. And therefore, they bore the brunt of ISIS attacks in 2014. Actually, they endured genocide.
I understand that advocates call the Yazidi Survivors Law an important first step. What do you think about that?
That's very recent. That was only announced yesterday. It's an important step forward, I would say, in efforts to address the consequences of crimes that were committed by ISIS against Yazidis and also against other minority groups. Now, the law focuses primarily on female survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. And there were, of course, many of the survivors of such violence among the Yazidi of conflict violence were indeed women and children. So this is a very important step forward.
Father, can you talk about the Christian communities there and how they're doing and how you're able to help them?
The Christian communities are sadly growing smaller in numbers. So this has been, their numbers have been decreasing, especially since 2003. And over the past 17 years or so, numbers have gone down to about maybe somewhere like 10 to 15% of the 1.5 million that they used to be before. So that is indeed a very small number. How are they doing right now? It depends where they are located. The Christians who were most affected by the displacement induced by ISIS were the Christians in the Nineveh Plains. And the Nineveh Plains, which is in the vicinity of Mosul, Nineveh is, of course, the place where Jonah was sent to preach conversion. So there is this I would say we're in biblical heartland. The Christian community has been there from antiquity, and they were driven out of their homeland. So the psychological impact has been, of course, very great. But the financial losses, the material losses of people have left many families separated, with some members of the family, usually the younger members, who might have ventured abroad beyond Iraq's borders. Quite a few continue to be displaced without any prospect of being definitely resettled in a third country. So they would be refugees or asylum seekers in intermediate countries, Jordan, Turkey, for example, Lebanon. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people.
Well, Father, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Thank you for what you do. We really appreciate it. Father Cassar, Director of the Jesuit Refugee Service in Iraq. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, new leadership. The Supreme Knight of the Knights of Columbus outlines his plans for the future. And meet the host of EWTN's Savoring Our Faith. Father Leo Patalinghug joins us for a wide-ranging interview. Pope Francis appoints a new bishop to the Diocese of St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Bishop Jerome Foggio is originally from Cameroon and has served as a priest in the Virgin Islands for more than 30 years. The St. Thomas Diocese is made up of 30,000 Catholics across the islands. Patrick Kelly has officially become the Supreme Knight of the Knights of Columbus. He says that he wants to spread the organization's message of charity and strong faith.
For nearly 140 years, we have been inviting men to become the disciples of Christ and the men of virtue whose witness can change our communities. As Supreme Knight, my goal is to help us deepen and widen the order's impact, to empower you.
The new Supreme Knight joined the organization as a student at Marquette University. Later spent more than 2 decades in the U.S. Navy. The Knights of Columbus sponsors EWTN News Nightly. Father Leo Patalinghug, the host of EWTN's Savoring Our Faith, has a new initiative focused on helping the homeless, and no surprise, it involves cooking.
When I turned a certain age, a significant number, I'm not going to say which one. Most people would get themselves, I don't know, a convertible. But you know what I want to get? A food truck.
Father Leo says the truck would be used to feed the homeless and those affected by the coronavirus. Doing the cooking will be chefs from very different backgrounds. And to tell us more about the initiative is Father Leo, founder and director of Plating Grace and host of EWTN's Savoring Our Faith. Father Leo, so great to see you again. Okay, so tell us all about this food truck and why you feel it's so important. Also, what type of food will you be serving and who's going to be doing all the cooking?
Well, it's a pleasure to be on with you. And this truck has been in the works for a very long time. But in the midst of the pandemic, there was a real calling that I had because people couldn't come to church or to community. And so, you know what? Church goes to you. And best way to do it is to literally go to you. And that's why the truck, it is now officially called the Plating Grace and Grub food truck. It's going to be serving international comfort food, and we are also going to be working with returning citizens, ex-offenders, people who've been in prison before, and we're giving them a formation experience so they know that if they've done their penance, there's always a place at the table, not just as a guest, but as a servant, because that's what Christ calls us to be.
I love that. Okay, other than your milestone birthday, which you mentioned, you didn't really say the number, but we know, not too far behind you. What inspired you to start this wonderful initiative?
Well, a lot of people see my show and they actually wonder, does the food actually taste good? And oftentimes when I speak around the world, I'll maybe do a small sample for a few to taste, but it really has become a joke. They'll say that Father Leo's show is more of a talk show than an actual cooking show, because I do more talking, because I believe that food is only a vehicle, basically the hook to the deeper message to feed people's hungers. But we know that Christ used food and he shared it with people, and he was able to touch hearts and minds by going through the stomach. And that's why our international comfort food, basically a 3-part menu. So if you were a customer, I would ask you, what is your main course? Is it chicken, beef, shrimp, or veggies? And then I would ask you your method. Do you want a quesadilla, a noodle stir fry, or do you want a salad? And then here's where the international part comes. Me and my team, we've created 5 very different sauces reflecting the international flavors, whether it's a sea spice Italian, whether it's playfully provincial French-style sauce. It could be a barbecue USA, an Asian fusion, or a Latin chimichurri-inspired sauce. You tell us what you want, we put it together, and hopefully you get a message with the meal.
All right, Father Leo, that sounds so good. You can't hear it. My stomach's rumbling right now. Before we let you go, before we go to the break, I want to know, how much money do you need to raise for the food truck? How's it going so far? And if folks want to help out, how can they do so?
That's great. Thanks for asking. We're hoping to raise $75,000, which is really not a lot of money. But we want to take these small gifts, put them in Jesus' hands, and turn it into a truck. And basically, we want to also guarantee that we'll have a little bit of money for the first 6 months to support these interns or these ex-offenders as basically our employees. And people can always either go to the website at platinggrace.com or go directly to our GoFundMe crowdfunding source, which is platinggrace.org/GoFundMe. And there you have many ways that you can contribute, but also pray.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Father Leo. And right after the break, we'll have more from Father Leo on his Lenten tips for the faithful. We'll be right back. We are back and talking again with Father Leo Patalinghug, who is doing more than feeding the homeless and helping those who had once been incarcerated. As if his plate is not full enough, he is also directing a series of Lenten retreats for the faithful. And Father Leo is here again to tell us more about his plans for Lent and also some advice for the faithful. Welcome back, Father Leo. Okay, let's talk about your Lenten message. Why did you decide to focus on the wise men in the desert?
Well, we have a 3-part retreat, and what we wanted to do is talk about the epiphanies of Jesus Christ, because really Lent is a time to get to know who Jesus is. And there are 3 key epiphanic moments in the scriptures. And I teamed up with 2 other priests, and we basically do a presentation, and then we go into a deep dish discussion. So for me, I had the epiphanies simply because I wanted to let people know that these gifts that the Magi gave are, in a sense, the 3 pillars of our Lenten experience of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And I make these connections to those 3 gifts. And so it's a great way to know how these 3 wise Magi went through the desert, as we are doing, and they encountered the Lord, and they gave their gifts to Christ.
I know earlier this week you noted that soon after the transfiguration of our Lord, Jesus performed an exorcism. Tell us about that connection and what it means for the faithful today.
You see, that is one of those other epiphanic moments where we hear a revelation that this Jesus is more than just a great guy. He is God. He is the Son of Man. And from that mountaintop experience, we are told to listen to him. And if you were to read the Luke account of the Transfiguration, you'll see how when he gets down that mountain, where really the mission of Christ begins, you see how the first thing he encounters is a father with an only son who is possessed by the demon. And here's the power of Jesus. Even the demons listen to Christ. Wouldn't it be wonderful if every Catholic and every Christian would do that?
Absolutely. You know, before I let you go, since you're a chef, okay, we have to ask you, do you have any favorite Lenten dishes or recipes that you can share with us? And if so, where can we find them? And also, do you have any tips on fasting?
I do. I have plenty of them. They're all available at the website at platinggrace.com. I give a special 5-week recipe, basically one that you can do for every Friday of your family that kind of takes an international flair. My favorite, I'll admit, is the falafel because it's just so comforty, delicious, and crunchy, and it's fried. But here's what I really recommend. Let's buy less, and let's go through our pantries, and let's actually cook the stuff that would be considered leftovers. So what I'm trying to do is get people to think and reflect more simply in their life. You can do the dramatic, but I think following Mother Teresa, small acts with lots of love and a lot of flavor.
Yeah, I love that idea. I'm definitely going to try that for sure. Father Leo, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate your time. Good luck with the food truck. Keep us posted. Father Leo Patalinghug, founder and director of Plating Grace and host of EWTN's Savoring Our Faith. Thank you so much again.
Pleasure. Thanks.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.